Hi, and welcome to the Brohoyo podcast, the podcast about gacha in general and Hoyoverse games in specific. I'm your host, Steven, and this is my co host, David.
Hey everyone.
And this week, we are going to continue to discuss Genshin Elements by actually bundling together Anemo and Geo Elements from Genshin Impact into one discussion. Um, I guess to start it off, Dave, what are your thoughts with? Let's go with Geo first.
Okay. Yeah, so we're gonna start with Geo today and then shift over to Animo a little later on. But yeah, so talking about Geo first, so we have a few characters I know we're gonna talk about their usage and break them down. Some maybe are a little older and some being more recent. For me, the Geo spot lands where I never got to do the mono Geo team. I never got to construct that fully and completely, but there was a decent chunk of the game where I know we aren't going to talk about her because she's a 4-star unit. But I was running Ning Wang and Zhang Li as part of a dual Geo team with Geo Daddy and Geo Mommy there, which was a lot of fun to play. I kind of enjoy her play style. Plus, once it was around the time she got her outfit that you earned for free in the game if you were playing during that, I think, Lantern, right, that particular year, because her outfit was awesome and one of the first ones I think that was introduced, if not the first one that was introduced.
Yeah, I believe it was her and Kaching had.
Yeah, she was the first free skin that was
Yes.
available. I'm trying to remember the exact timeline, and so that seeing that kind of me to try out the Geo team. So and obviously Geo Daddy with Zhang Li being in every party that I seem to create ever, and my anniversary recap reminds me just how much I use Zhang Li. So very popular choices, and then most recently, jumping to Navia, whom I absolutely adore. And then unfortunately, then the heartbreak of not getting Jalonin on the most, recent Geo relevant banner. That's kind of been my Geo story arc, if you will. What about you, Steve? Any special characters stand out for you in your heart in terms of traversing Tevat?
So with Geo, primarily Inazuma, when Ito was coming out, I was kind of excited for him because I was hoping that he would be using a different model than they ended up giving him, which is the standard, I think, adult male model. I was really hoping for someone more like a big buff barbarian guy, kind of like my image here, my little avatar here. But instead, they used the regular model. And, there were lots of jokes about his skinny arms and so on and so forth. So I ended up not pulling him. But I was very, very excited about the potential of kind of a more barbarian, big buff guy character that never fully coalesced. More recently, Navia I ended up getting because of the unfortunate swapping of items of weapons pull that we ended up with there. So since I got her weapon, it was I guess I might as well get the character. um, so ended up going that route. Not that I don't love her. She's great. I use her in my not quite Pokemon team, my off field damage team with her and Miko and Kokomi and who's the last one that I use on that team? Doesn't matter. Basically, all the characters are off fielders, so I can just constantly switch and don't have to worry too much about it. And then I did manage to get Zalonin, which I enjoy her. She doesn't slot into many of my teams, primarily because of Kokomi and the fact that she wants to be on mixed teams as well. She'll probably end up being on my Malvika team once I finally get around to getting Malvika actually fully built, because I've been dragging my feet doing that. So it'll probably be Malvika and Zalonin together. But at the moment, she's sort of backup for Kokomi, if I'm being honest.
All right. Well, let's take it back then. Let's jump all the way back and start talking about our usage rates for the Geo units. So, who are we going to be starting with in breaking down first?
So let's start with Arataki Ito. He is sort of the poster boy of Mono Geo. For a very, very long time, he was basically the only DPS character for Mono Geo. He's the face of that team, I would say. Um, and his usage is honestly pretty low in general. Through most of 3.0, he floated around 20%, dropping down to about 10% over the course of it. There was one patch, 3.3.1, that Abyss cycle. He bumped up to around 40% usage rate for a little bit and then quickly kind of dropped off again. He also jumped back up in the 4.5 cycle of Abysses. Um, and my best guess is that's, I believe, Navia, or shortly thereafter. It's either Navia or Chiori came out in that time period. So, the usage rate jumped up in proportion.
For the 4.5 cycle.
Yeah, for the 4.5 cycle, we saw a jump up there because of, Geo getting a buff in general for that Abyss. But primarily, he's really been floating, ever downward. He's been decreasing in usage. By the time of 5.2, he's at 4.89 usage.
5%.
Yeah, sub 5%. Barely below, but still below. And I think that's primarily just because Mono Geo as a team archetype has just been functionally completely abandoned.
Yeah, I think that's fair. The hopes and dreams of Mono Geo supremacy, they're not really coming to fruition. And breaking down Ito very quickly, if you are an Ito enjoyer or you are an Ito haver and want to build him, he is a main DPS, so it's a pretty straightforward build. If you don't have this signature weapon, other options are going to include for weapons would be Skyward Pride, Serpent Spine, or White Blind. You're going to be running the Husk of Opulent Dreams on him. And for Arataki Ito, actually one of the rare defense scalers. So for Sands, you can have defense percentage there as your main stat. Goblet would be geo damage, circlet crit rate, crit damage. And then as far as substats to focus on, with the exception of defense, you're falling into that standard DPS subcategory there with crit damage, crit rate, energy recharge, but you are prioritizing defense percentage because of his scaling. The Mono team, as an example team that we've been referencing here, would be something like him, Albedo, Zhongli, and Goro would be kind of an example of a Mono Geo team. Or similar to what Steve said, he's kind of the poster boy of Geo teams. So you kind of have maybe a more flexible team that's not technically only Geo. And it basically would be, if you don't have maybe Zhongli, you throw in Kokomi as like a healer type of individual. So that's Arataki Ito in a nutshell in terms of combat and how to build him. Though I will also give Ito some props in terms of whenever he shows up in events, just being that ridiculously overly optimistic, energetic individual. So I always get a good chuckle whenever he's involved in some event. So I'll at least give him credit there, despite his usage rates.
I mean, he was the event Archon for a while, if I remember correctly. That was the joke. He was just in so many events back to back to back.
Yeah.
But you did bring up a good point that he's a defense scaler, and I think that's this is as good a time of any to mention that Geo tends to be a defense scaling element. It's not a hard and fast rule, but a lot of their characters up until very recently primarily were defense scalers in one way, shape, or form.
When you say defense scalers, do you mean more defensive minded attributes? Because like Zhongli would be like HP.
So you hit the caveat there, which is it seems like that happened, that originally it was going to be HP, and then at some point in 2.0 and 3.0 they flipped it to where Hydro became HP and Geo became defense, because Zhongli's the odd one out. I feel like he should have been defense scaling. If he had been built a year later, he would have been defense scaling. But because of the time period in which he was released, that those sort of elemental alignments hadn't been fully crystallized yet, pun intended. And so he ended up as HP scaling instead of defense scaling.
Okay, fair enough.
But yeah, just wanted to bring that up. And you know what? Let's move right along to Navia. Let's we'll go to Navia. We'll save the Archon for last, as far as our Geo units go.
Fair enough. So what's the word on Navia? One of, if not the best idle animation in the game. Whipping out the sunglasses. What's our girl looking like?
So when she released in 4.3, she had over 50% usage rate. And then she dropped down to about 20% in the subsequent abysses because didn't have a favorable abyss cycle. It wasn't a pro Geo cycle. She then shot back up to just below 50% for Chiori's release, and then dropped back down. Now I'm going to kind of bundle Chiori in with Navia because from what little data we have, the two of them kind of run parallel to each other. On Chiori's release, she was also above 50%, and then as soon as the Abyss moved away from focusing on Geo, she dropped down to 15-20%. As of the most recent Spiral Abyss cycle, Chiori was 26.33 usage rate, and Navia was 24.55. So the two of them are kind of lockstep with each other. And they both have a very an above average, because again, we mentioned in the last episode 14 point something percent is your roughly 1/7 of the of 100%. So anything above 14% is I would say above average usage rate, and both of them sit very comfortably above that bar.
Well, that would be for elements.
Yes, so elemental representation is
for elemental representation, not necessarily characters' individual usage rate, but
true.
So for Navia and short, because those characters they released them, like you said, relatively close to each other, which was nuts because until Navi and Chiori, Geo had this huge drought of 5-star characters because it was. And I'm maybe getting this out of order. Was it literally Ito, and then like a year and a half later it was Chiori and Navia, or Navia Chiori, or whatever the order was there, back to back?
It was more than a year.
A little off.
It was more than a year because there was no Geo characters in Sumeru. It would have been Ito near the mid to late 2.0, and then Navia came out in 4.3. So it would have been at least about a year and a half or more.
And then we got Navia, and then shortly thereafter, boom, we get Chiori. So, you mentioned the Abyss not being, Geo friendly, and so their usage kind of fell off. You'd almost argue that this game isn't very Geo friendly with how the representation there gets handled, and what they interact with, or how they interact with other elements and the such, which is a shame because Navia's kit is pretty fun, and I enjoy playing her, but I think she's just unfortunately capped by her element. If she had been a different element, I think the ceiling could be a lot higher for her. And then she was, again, for me, still be just as fun to play, if not more fun, if it interacted with more elements. But as it stands, she's still one of my favorite characters, and like I said, that's probably the best idle animation in the game, in my opinion. But just to break down the Navia build very quickly, so there's a couple different ways to build her, if she's going to be your main DPS versus if she's going to be your sub DPS, on the field versus maybe off the field DPS. So focused and looking at the main DPS first, and this is going to be using the best artifact set. This would be the Nighttime Whispers. 4-piece would be the best artifact set in this particular build. If you don't have the main signature weapon there, the Verdict, Serpent Spines is acceptable. The Unforged Wolf's Gravestone, the Ultimate Overlord's Mega Magic Sword, also an option there too. And then you have a standard DPS build, right? Sans attack percentage, Geo damage on the Goblet, crit rate, crit damage on the Circlet, and then focusing those on the substats with some energy recharge as well. an example team, and this is actually the team that I probably run her with most commonly, would be her, Yelan, Bennett, and Jingling. And then looking at a couple other builds, there's another DPS build if you're pairing her specifically with Farina. You would use instead of the Nighttime Whispers set, you would use and I'm gonna butcher it again, fourth week in a row mentioning the set, fourth week in a row butchering it. The Mara Chaussee Hunter set, you'll run that 4-piece, but everything else would be the same: attack percentage, geo damage bonus, crit damage on the circlet, and then focusing crit damage, energy recharge, attack percentage, crit rate. And that team looks a little bit like Farina, Bennett, Navia, and then Zhongli, so you get the geo resonance in there with Navia and Zhongli. So that is a very specific build with that specific team. So that's an option there. Now, if you're going to be doing Navia as a sub DS and kind of use her maybe as an off field, and just have her out there relying on her ult essentially to do her damage, and then switching to your main character, we're going back similar to the Nighttime Whispers build, with an exception on the sands that if you can't find an attack percentage sands, energy recharge would also be appropriate as well. But everything else essentially remains the same. And then that sub DPS build maybe looks a little bit something like her, Zhongli, again for the resonance, Yelan, and then like Hu Tao. And you're running Hu Tao as your main DPS with the synergy with Yelan there for kind of a reverse vaporized team. And then Navi's ult just bombarding away, quite literally. For Chiori, just to go through her very quickly, she is also going to kind of be in that DPS category, though she's predominantly going to be the sub DPS. She's not going to be your main. But for her build, you're looking outside of the signature weapon, the Primordial Jade Cutter, Mist Splitter Reforged. For free-to-play options, going to be something like the Cinnabar Spindle or the Flute of Espitzel. And you're going to be looking at her artifact set. You have a couple options. You can either go with the 4-piece Golden Troop set, or you could go the Husk of Opulent Dreams. For Sands, again, being a defense scaler to Steve's point, you have defense or attack on the Sands, geo damage bonus on the Goblet, circlet crit rate, crit damage, prioritizing crit rate, crit damage, and then defense percent and attack percentage. You can run her in that mono geo team that I mentioned with Arataki Ito, Zhongli, and what's his name, Goro. And then another option would be that double geo team, similar to Navia in terms of instead of Navia, it's Chiori, and then Zhongli, and then you have Yelan, Hu Tao in there as the elemental react to each other.
So I guess let's go into the final geo character, Zhongli, the Geo Daddy himself. As far as his usage rates go, he floats around 75% throughout most of the history of 3.0 and 4.0. 3.x, 4.x. Abysses, he started at around 80%. He'll occasionally peak above 80, and then occasionally he'll drop down. He once dropped down as low as 50%. My guess is that was probably a healer friendly Abyss. That was in 3.8.1.
That was probably when, if your HP changed, something buffs happen. So a shield isn't really doing it for you in those instances.
That or it
was wolves, and wolves don't care, and they don't care.
Yeah, wolves don't care about shields, so they'll bleed you through them. So I'm willing to bet that was, Or
would that have been when the kind of that Arlecchino mechanic was introduced, the Bond of Life mechanic? Was that 3.8 maybe?
No, that would have been in 4.
That was
that had been 4, and
slightly. I was 1. Yeah.
Arlecchino technically wants shields because she wants to keep the bond on her. She doesn't want it healed off.
Yeah, I just mentioned. The Bond of Life mechanic was what I was stalling to try and remember that mechanic name.
You're good.
But yeah, no, that would have been in 4.x, not. I was thinking end of 3.8 was that time frame, but I was off by a patch cipher there, so ignore that.
But
yeah, so Zhongli.
So his 5.2 Spiral Abyss usage is floating at around 74%, 74.06%. So he's gotten some stock back. He's seeing usage again. He's nowhere near the like 90% that he was in 1.0 and earlier. But he's still very significantly. He's still a significant character. He's still seeing a lot of usage, and I mean, as everyone kind of knows, his shields are big, and you can't tank as much as you could in the past. Damage numbers are going up, but he can still, he can still absorb some damage for you. But yeah, I guess.
Yeah, it's been a long journey with Zhongli, and yeah, it's great to see his numbers still up. It's not too surprising considering he basically lets you ignore a lot of combat mechanics. You don't have to worry about dodging things as much. You don't have to worry about getting knocked out of your attack animations or anything like that, or stunned or anything like that. So to see his usage rate still be up, and to your point and your philosophy, they don't make bad Archons, so they're going to be relevant for a while. One would hope. As far as the Zhongli build, there's a couple different ways to go about it. There's kind of it's a sub DPS / support build. Either way you're looking at it, it's just a question of, are you leaning more towards that support, or are you leaning more towards the sub DPS side of things? So if you're leaning more towards the shield support, you're going to be looking at the Tenacity of the Millelith as the best artifact set, and then it's just HP, HP, HP. Everywhere you can get HP, it's HP, and then some energy recharge so you can, throw down the meteor. For weapons on this, it's actually a unique case where you can make the argument that Black Tassel as a 3-star weapon is the best choice here. But for free-to-play options, there's a plethora. You have the Dialogues of the Desert Sages, Favonius Lance. If you have Staff of Homa, that's also a winner as well. I'd probably like Staff of Homa better personally because that's just a bunch more HP. But again, you can make the argument Black Castle would technically be the best weapon here. Example teams would be, and we kind of mentioned a few previously, but some other example teams would be something like him, Farina, Neuvillette, and Charlotte. Or if you're maybe going for a physical team, and this is a team I mentioned when we talked about Cryo, because I ran this, it would be him, Zhongli, Raiden Shogun, or him, Shenhe, Raiden Shogun, and Eula. And that would be a physical team because those shields allow you to play Eula and not worry about getting knocked out of your attacks and your charged attacks with the Greatsword, which, while look very elegant, can be very slow and kind of lumbering around, so you don't want to get knocked out mid-animation. So his shields assist with that. If you are leaning more towards him being a Geo sub DPS, then you're looking more towards the stereotypical build here. Staff of Homa would be the best weapon for him, but other options would be something like Engulfing Lightning, the Catch if you farmed that, or Favonius Lance again. For the best artifacts set, you're actually doing two pieces. You're doing the 2-piece Noblesse Oblige and the 2-piece Archaic Petra would be the best artifact choices here. Sands would be attack percentage, Goblet be looking at geo damage, Circlet crit rate, crit damage, and then for substats, you're focusing attack percentage, HP percentage, crit rate, crit damage, some energy recharge, and then we've mentioned, I think, enough mono geo teams that you get the picture on that. So that's Zhongli, and man, I remember the controversy. I want to take this back to maybe players that were around when he came out, but there was the big controversy of when he was released in terms of how strong was he or how not strong was he, and then the buffs that he got or received, did he really need them? And it was an interesting time, and I know there were a lot of content creators out there talking about some of his mechanics, and I don't want to rehash drama or anything like that. It's interesting to see what he was going to be and then what he turned out to be, and then the relevance he still holds because of the changes that were made for those shields.
Yeah. I mean, there are definitely thoughts to be had in that regard. But maybe not digging up old wounds, as it were, or you know.
Well, fair enough. Then let's talk about something new then, because I know we talked about all of the characters that have kind of we've been able to track their history, and I do want to talk about one more character very quickly. It's a little bit of a sore subject because I missed her on her banner, but being the newest Geo unit, Jalonin, we don't have too much data on her yet. I think the data that we maybe do have shows a very high usage rate, but
Yeah.
it's because that's what Hoyoverse does. They launch a character and they make a Spiral Abyss that's going to showcase and really cater to the kit. So seeing Jalonin and seeing her have, close to 90% usage rate, it's her signature, it was her signature one. So that kind of makes sense.
Well,
But
I think
go
it's
ahead. Go ahead.
actually so she is sitting at 89.42% usage rate. I do think part of it is actually because of Malvika. That Malvika's we're in her abyss. She's a Night Soul using character, and her best support is Zillion. Combined with the fact that she is a very strong character, I think that going forward we're going to see Zilonin sit pretty high. I think she's going to be a staple going forward. I don't want
That
to
just
bet.
makes missing her all the more painful. But go ahead.
Yeah, I don't want to bet too much on that or claim that as too much of a like. Oh no, she's unpower creepable because we're about to go into we're I guess 6 months out, but we're only 6 months out from going to Shneznaya, and so maybe there will be a new system, but at least off of the way that her kit is built, assuming that we aren't going too crazy on the power creep train.
Look, yeah, I'm never gonna say something is unbeatable.
Yeah.
Again, like that's not. I don't like to speak in always and never platitude type things, but to say that a character is uncreepable, all of us Silver Wolf havers are shedding tears of, oh no, this character will never be power crept.
Yeah.
And so Hoyoverse is, did it in Star Rail, and discussion I'm sure to be had about the current state of power creep in Star Rail, which we'll address maybe in a future episode. So yeah, I definitely don't see them. I definitely don't see them keeping her as the one, but
Yeah.
as far as the one for the time being, yeah, very very much so for the time being. She's very strong. Again, which just makes missing out and losing the 50-50 on her all the more painful. But as far as her build, very sorry.
No. You
You
finish your build. I'll go
right.
after that.
Okay. Yes. So just to get through her build real quick, and then Steve, I want to kind of throw it back to you and hear maybe some more of your thoughts as you are a Jalone and Haber. Lucky son of a... Anyway, she's gonna have a couple different options in terms of her build. So she has kind of probably the more popular build would be the Geo Shredding or Defense Shredding support unit. And then she does have the Geo DPS build as well. But as far as the support build, outside of the signature weapon, you're going to be looking at weapons like Freedom Sworn, Favonius Sword, Flute of the Ezbitzel, and then for the artifact set, the Scroll of the Hero of Cinder City. And you're looking for the 4-piece on that. For the main stats, Sands, we're looking at Energy Recharge, Goblet. Oh, is that a Geo with a defense scaling ability? Sure is. So more defense there. And for Circlet, you can go defense percentage or a healing bonus is the main stat there. And then for the substats, you're going to be focused on energy recharge and defense percentage with a target of energy recharge somewhere between like 180-ish to 220-ish, somewhere in that range. And then once you get into that window, then yeah, we can go focus on defense percentage. As far as the teams go, there's basically the two teams here. I'll go ahead and say both teams because you can technically do either one with either build. But for the Geo DPS, the second team is primarily going to be the one. But there's her, Neolette, Farina, Kazuo would kind of be an example as far as like the defense shredder build. And then if you're going for more of the Geo build, it would be like her, Navia, Bennett, and then Jingling would kind of be the example on the Geo build. And then that Geo build itself would be slightly different. So in terms of artifact sets, you're not using the Scroll of Hero of Cinder City exclusively. You could still use that, or you have another option with the Husk of Opulent Dreams that you could go And then you're going to be looking at Sands being defense percentage. You're going to look at geo damage on the goblet instead of defense. And you're going to be looking at the circlet being crit damage or crit rate, which in the other build, remember, was defense again or healing bonus. And then, of course, you're going to focus those substats more on the DPS side of things, right? So crit damage, crit rate being the main focuses, and then defense and energy recharge being that follow-up as opposed to kind of the primary things you're looking for on the support build. But that is Xilonen in a nutshell. Again, a very strong character. But Steve, I want to throw it back to you because I know you had a few more thoughts on her, and then you can probably speak even more so to her as a Xilonen haver.
Well, I was actually going to just really quickly wrap up Geo. I think we covered most.
Oh, well, that's me then. No?
But you're good. You're good. Basically, I just wanted to really quickly wrap up Geo and kind of give final thoughts, I guess, on the element, which is, at least for me, that, as you mentioned, Navia is really held back by her element, and that's sort of the way Geo unfortunately feels. The fact that Crystallize is such a nothing burger of a reaction really kind of hurts the element a lot, that, you know, it doesn't get to benefit from any significant damage buff. The only reason why Navia is even really kind of able to function is because of the cracked scaling that she has. She basically,
her multipliers are nasty, yeah.
Yeah, her multipliers are nasty. The only reason why she even technically benefits from Crystallize is because every time you crystallize, she adds more to her own personal multipliers. It's not a like outside effect, so she doesn't get those multiplicative effects that you get from, you know, Pyro, Hydro, etc., etc. And you can't even do the sort of, you know, random bullshit go that you can do with Electro, Dendro, Hydro. So yeah, unfortunately, Geo is just, as a lot of people say, orange physical. You know, what the numbers are, and you're just not going to really be able to do much to make it better. I don't think it's a dead element, but I can see why so many Geo characters are functionally support characters. They're just not expected to be damage drivers on most teams. But yeah, do you have any thoughts to share before we jump into Anemo?
No, I think that's a good summation of things. So yeah, let's dive right into Anemo. And Steve, as far as for you, any personal characters that you wanted to talk about your own experience with very quickly before we get into the numbers?
I mean, at least for me personally, my first technically my first 5-star was Jean. So yeah, you know, was an Anemo character, and then my first limited 5-star was Kazuha, who is also, you know, Anemo. So I am a Anemo haver, Anemo enjoyer. Great element, 10 out of 10. Love the swirl effect. Love the jumpiness that a lot of their characters get. I really do enjoy the element. Would like a better resonance for the team, because I think I don't remember if they've updated it, but last I checked, I thought it was still the movement speed bonus, which is neat, but not quite as good as some of the other ones. You know, plus attack percentage pyro. But yeah, no. Like Anemo good. What are your thoughts?
Okay. Like Eugene was my first 5-star unit. And then, however, unlike you, that is actually my only 5-star Anemo character. I don't have another 5-star unit. I wish I did. I wish I had Cloud Retainer. She looks like so much fun to travel the overworld with. And then I'm a sucker for like elegant characters, and I guess technically also there's a mommy Dami element to her as well, being like an old sage wise type. And apparently, as we explored in previous episodes, that's my type. So I don't have too much personal experience with Anemo because I have not really focused a team around Anemo because I am not an Anemo user haver. I attempted for a little bit to try and build Sucrose, but it just wasn't the same. So, and I never finished building her, so I never finished the team. So, that being said, let's dive into the numbers on Anemo, and who we're going to start with today.
So we're going to start with Wanderer, who on my team, I believe I named him Fred. I think he's Fred in my account. I'd have to actually go and look that up. I did not give him a name worthy of respect. Not that there's anything wrong with being named Fred. If there are any Freds in the audience, that is not a slam against you, Frederick. It's just I find it funny giving him a goofy name like Fred. So Wanderer, he at release he hit about 30% usage rate, and he hasn't really broken that ever since. He's had a couple, Abyss runs where he's broken 25%, but for the most part, he's floated between 20 and 10% as far as usage goes. Which I find interesting because looking at 5.2 Spiral Abyss usages, he's down to 5.0% usage, but Chaska, who is basically him but better, is sitting at 50.86%. So I don't know if it's just that Wanderer didn't hit with people, like just as a character, but considering the playstyle is very similar, not perfect, but very similar between Chaska and the Wanderer, the fact that Chaska's sitting at 50%, slightly over 50% usage, is impressive to me.
Yeah, I think maybe you kind of hit on it there that the character just didn't resonate with folks. Maybe this was in part a case, maybe his role in the story plot being bad guy and then having a redemption story arc, and this isn't the villain we wanted to have, the redemption story arc. She's still coming back, okay? In our heart of hearts, we still believe she's coming back.
Look,
I don't even say her name. Don't even want to say her name.
You know what? Shniznaya, she'll be back. She'll be back.
Don't give me hope, Steve. Don't give me hope.
I believe.
But to go back to Scaramouche and the Wanderer here real quick. Yeah, so I think you're maybe onto something with that. I will say that the playstyle, the hovering in the air, is kind of a cool thing to experience in his trial, and just kind of play around with that a little bit. But as far as his build, he is going to be a DPS type, and there's two different ways that you can build him as your main DPS. There's kind of the standard Anemo DPS build, which is going to revolve around outside of the signature weapon. Either you can look at the Lost Prayer of the Sacred Winds, if you've gotten that. You can look at the Widsith, or the Ballad of the Boundless Blue, or the Map of Mare as free-to-play options. For the best artifact set, you can look at one of two choices here. You can look at the Desert Pavilion Chronicle, or you can look at the Shiminawa's Reminiscence. So either one of those would be appropriate here. And then for your main stats, again, standard DPS. So Sans attack, Goblet, Anemo damage, Circlet, crit damage, crit rate. And then focusing on those as the substats as well with a little splash of energy recharge. An example team here would be something like the Wanderer, Zhongli, Bennett, and Faruzan would kind of maybe be an example there. Or you can look at like maybe a Taser type team. So again, him and Fazuan with Yelan and Kuki Shinobi kind of being an example there. If you want, there's another main build for DPS choices here, which involves here it comes again, the Marichase Hunter set. So you'd be focused on that set. Similar items in terms of the weapon choices here, with Tula's Remembrance being another option there as far as the signature weapon, of course, but that's actually kind of not. I say that being another option as in it's not the top option actually here. There's Cash Flow Supervision would actually kind of be the top option here. But again, going back to the free-to-play choices, Lost Prayer of the Sacred Winds, the Widsith, Blackcliff, Agate, something like that. For the main stats, at Sans, you could go attack percentage or elemental mastery. You could go for Goblet, would be back to Anima bonus, crit damage on the Circlet, and again, focusing those things as a substats. And then a sample team would basically, again, him, Faruzan, Bennett would kind of be an example team here. But this build is, again, based around the Marichase Hunter set and having Farina. That's kind of part of the gimmick of this particular one, because of what Farina can provide there in terms of like the crit rate and such. And then that gives you more of an opportunity to focus on crit damage on those substats.
All right. Then let's move on to the pocket prince of our heart, Xiao. So
angsty boy.
Angsty boy. So
Angsty boy.
So just I guess as a warning, his numbers are also fairly low. So he starts out at about 25% as of 3.0. Basically floats around 5% for most of it. He does jump up in 4.4, which I believe is when Jade Retainer came out.
Cloud Retainer.
Thank you. Cloud Retainer.
And I was like, Jade, that's
no, yeah,
my guy.
I did. I was getting it mixed up. Anyways, Cloud Retainer came out, I believe, around then.
Same energy, same mommy energy. Yeah, go ahead.
But so you saw a jump in usage, and he actually did level out higher than he had previously, sitting at around like roughly 10%, 15%. But for the most part, he immediately kind of dropped back down for a while. I actually don't have his 5.2 Spiral Abyss numbers because he is below the threshold of like 3%. So he is not seeing a lot of usage recently, but again, I think part of it is that he's just has such a specific build that he has to have, and he's an old favorite, but time has not worked in his favor, and it's taken so long for him to get the support that he needs that he's similar to Blade in HSR, where there's sort of just a feeling of like, well, I don't know if you can save him at this point. I think you might like him, but he's got an uphill battle.
Well, look, he's a loner. He doesn't like to be around people, and that's obvious because his team's usage is very low. So lore accurate, he's a loner. But just to talk very quickly then about his build, I won't spend too much time on him. The main DPS build here is going to focus with the Vermilion Hereafter artifact set. Weapons would include Staff of Homa, Calamity Queller, Deathmatch, Lithic Spear, and Blackcliff Pole if you don't have his signature weapon. Main stats, attack percentage, energy recharge on the sands, anemo damage on the goblet, crit rate, crit damage on circlet, focusing energy recharge, crit rate, crit damage, attack percentage as the substats. Example teams, him, Cloud Retainer, Farina, Farazon for maybe like a hyper type team there, or a double Anemo team, be something like him, Jean, Zhongli, and Albedo, kind of being an example team in that regards. There is an alternative DPS build for him that is based around a different artifact set with the Marachase Hunter, or Viridescent Veneerer and Gladiator's Family, doing like a 2-and-2 piece there. Similar main stats, substats. It's just an alternative build, but still ultimately doing the same job, which would be a main DPS. But that's our edgy, angsty boy Zhao. And we can move on to maybe a less angsty boy, or are we moving on to...
So I'm going to kind of bundle together two again.
Okay.
So we're going to do the Anemo Archon, Kazuha, and then the actual Anemo Archon, Venti. Kazuha's usage at the beginning of 3.0 was again sitting high 90s. He did drop off for a little bit, dropping as low as about 60% in 3.6, but he very quickly rallied, and he, for the most part, has been floating at around 80% usage average. Again, he had another low point in 4.3, dropping down to about 55% usage. As of 5.2, Kazuha is at a 66.6% usage rate. I think that part of that is just because of Jilonin, kind of the defense shred that she has, and Kazuha is typically used for a very similar role on that team. And there just hasn't... He's universally good, but there hasn't been any team where he's best in slot for a bit. At least to my knowledge. I could be wrong, but I don't think any of the recent characters have been going, yeah, Kazuha is best in slot for me, or Jilonin wouldn't be able to be subbed in for that purpose. But yeah, he's our actual Archon. And then for Venti, his numbers are unfortunately a little bit more depressing. In 3.0, he was sitting at about 33% usage rate, and it's all downhill from there. He actually drops down to about 5% usage rate by the end of
Ooh.
4.7. And again, I think unfortunately for him, his main value is the black hole kind of suck everything in ult that he has, and Abyss just doesn't do small gribbly enemies anymore, especially on floor 12. It's all about them bosses, and they are all immune to the suck. So he doesn't.
Yeah, he's the one Archon that tests your they don't make bad Archons theory. I mean, because I'd make the case he was good and was very useful and had a lot of utility, and then they just released Kazuha, and then he just did Venti's job better. It's not that Venti's bad per se.
I would argue they actively went out of their way to make Venti bad, because Venti is great in the role that he was designed for, which is crowd controlling massive groups of enemies.
Made domains a cinch.
Yeah, he is designed to do that. And then they basically went, oh no. It's the same thing that happened with Freeze. They made crowd control viable. And then as soon as they did that, crowd control is just the best option, because you can lock down enemies and then you don't have to worry about them anymore. And once you do that, they're like, oh no, people aren't playing our game. They're just crowd controlling everything and then burning it down. So they, hampered it. It's the same thing with a lot of turn-based games. Status effects don't matter, most of them, because if you use a status effect on the enemy or like on a boss or something, 90% of the time they're immune. So you've just made it pointless. Unfortunately, Venti is the status effect in a turn-based RPG.
Using tail whip in Pokemon. Who's really doing that?
Yeah.
Who really who's not who's not having tail whip be the first move you forget when you have 4 moves? Like, let's be real.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, it's not a bad, he's good.
I understand
his
purpose, but I want to learn quick attack,
They've designed the game to make him bad, unfortunately, moving forward. But anyway.
All right, so breaking down, we're gonna go through Kazuha's build first here, and then I'll mention Venti's here out of respect for the Archon, the lore Archon, not the real Archon, but the lore based Archon. So for Kazuha, couple builds here. There's the support build, and then there's a DPS build. So the support build based around Viridescent Veneer, 4-piece set. Outside of the signature weapon, you have Xephos' Moonlight, Iron Sting, and Favonius Sword. And you're going to be focused heavily on energy recharge and elemental mastery for the Sands. Goblet would be EM, Circlet would be EM, Sands could be either one. And then for substats, you're focused on elemental recharge, elemental mastery, and then crit damage, crit rate, attack percentage. An example team here would be something like Jingling, Bennett, Kazuha, Child, kind of maybe for a vaporized team. And then on a freeze team, something like him, Shenhe, Ayaka, and Kokomi would kind of maybe be an example there as a swirl supporter. If you're looking at Kazuha as a DPS, you're looking not too far off. I mean, the set is still the same. The Viridescent Veneer items are relatively the same. You have Mistsplitter Reforged, though, as the best weapon, but other options, again, Wolf Fang, Primordial Jade Cutter, Freedom Sworn, like that. And then for main stats, instead of solely focusing on elemental mastery and elemental recharge, your Sands could go EM or attack percentage. Your Goblet would be Anemo damage. Your Circlet would be crit rate, crit damage. And then substats, you're still focused on those aforementioned attributes. Sample teams, him, Farina, Bennett, and what's her name? Faruzan, or Faruzan, however you want to pronounce that. I don't quite remember. Or if you're just kind of maybe using him as like the driver in terms of Anemo, you have him, Bennett, Jingling, and Zhao. Not Zhao. Jingqiu. Our bookworm friend. So that would be an example for the Kazuha team, and then for Venti and Venti's builds, you're going to be looking essentially at the the elemental mastery swirl type build, right? That Anemo is so known for. Outside of signature weapon, you have the stringless Fading Twilight Favonius Warbow. Again, Viridescent Veneer being the artifact set and focused on elemental mastery. So not a huge difference from Kazuha in terms of being the elemental mastery support type. Example teams here would be something like him, maybe Mona, Ayaka, and Diona. Or if you're wanting to focus on more current things, maybe you do like a Hyper Bloom team, him, Kokomi, Nahida, and Raiden Shogun. Get a couple of those Archons in there with Kokomi, right? And then you have another build would be kind of more of a crit burst DPS build. So same artifact set with the Viridescent Veneer. Would be looking at attack percentage on Sands, Anemo damage on the Goblet, crit rate, crit damage on the Circlet, and focusing on those items on the substat with some Elemental Mastery and Recharge thrown in. And then, yeah, similar teams to the aforementioned build as well. Just he's going to be focused on doing his burst DPS as opposed to the reactions of Swirl. But those are going to be the Archons.
All right. Well, I guess just to really quickly wrap it up, what are your final thoughts on Anemo?
Well, I'm going to give two quick mentions here because I referenced her multiple times earlier, and then you referenced the other one here that I want to mention. So that would be Cloud Retainer and Chaska. So I'm just going to run very quickly through their builds for those that do have them or do enjoy playing them. For Cloud Retainer, you have a plunging attack support build, would be the support build. And then there's a burst healer build as well. And for the plunging attack support, you can go Viridescent Veneer or the Song of Days Past for the artifact set, focusing on energy recharge and attack percentage on the Sands, attack percentage on the Goblet, and the Circlet would be attack percentage healing bonus. It would be kind of an Anemo-based team, so it would be her, Farina, Xiao, and Faruzan. And then weapon-wise, outside of her signature weapon, Skyward Atlas, Oathsworn Eye, Flowing Purity, Favonius Codex. For her other build, you have more of a burst healer support, which would revolve around Noblesse Oblige 4-piece, or the Ocean Hued Clam as the 4-piece. And you're looking at Sands as being attack percentage, energy recharge, Goblet attack percentage, and Circlet would be the healing bonus. And you could run this in maybe like a vaporized team with like maybe Gaming, Farina, Bennett, something like that. Or again, you can run it in the Anemo team that I mentioned there previously. So that's kind of going to be Cloud Retainer in a nutshell. There's a couple other builds as well you could technically look at, but those are kind of the two main ones that I wanted to touch on just very quickly. And lastly, Chaska, going to be our most recent addition to the Anemo team or the Anemo squad. A couple different choices here in terms of the build. You have a DPS build based around the artifact set Obsidian Codex. So you're going to be looking at that as the main set with weapons, something like maybe Yelan's signature weapon, but free-to-play options if you don't have either of the signatures would be something like Scion and the Blazing Sun, Chainbreaker, something to that effect. For main stats, Sands attack percentage, Goblet, you could look at attack percentage, and then crit rate, crit damage on the Circlet, and focusing on those, plus some elemental mastery on the substats. An example team would maybe be something like her, Bennett, Farina, Shenhe, something like that. Or you can even look at a Taser team, just subbing out instead of Shenhe, throwing in Auroron, right, for that extra element to react with. And then as far as the Anemo Swirl DPS build, so if you're looking more from that perspective, you're going to be looking, instead of Obsidian Codex, you look at Viridescent Veneer, and then this looks very similar to what Kazuha was in terms of substats and main stats: attack percentage, elemental mastery, crit damage, crit rate, elemental mastery, or just elemental mastery, maybe all down the board, right? And then example teams would be something like her, Fischl, Jingling, and Kokomi, or similar team, but subbing out Jingling, putting in Auroron, right? Something like that.
Mm-hmm.
That would be example for Chaska build. So I did want to give her a little bit of love, being the most recent Anemo character.
Fair enough. So I guess back to my...
I know I spoke quickly, but I wanted to get through it because I know we're running a long time here, but I want to give everybody their fair share.
That's good. I guess back to the original question. What were your final thoughts on Anemo?
I don't really have any. Like I mentioned, with Anemo,
Okay.
unfortunately, that's probably the element I don't have a lot of on my account, so I haven't spent a lot of time focused on that type of reaction or that type of build. Maybe if Cloud Retainer gets a rerun and I have enough currency built up, maybe I go back and try it out. But um, yeah, I don't have too many thoughts on that. As far as Geo goes, like I said, we kind of already talked about that. But what were your thoughts on Anemo? Maybe you can provide a better closing than I have, which is, eh.
I guess my thoughts on Anemo is that it is one of the more versatile elements. It pretty much reacts with everything except for Dendro and Geo. So that makes it nice. It works well with the random bullshit Go teams that you get with Dendro, that you get with Electro, that you get with Hydro. That you can pretty much throw those 4 elements together, Anemo, Dendro, Electro, and Hydro, onto a team, and you'll get something that works. Just spam elemental reactions, and you'll make your way through whatever content it is. So in that sense, it's pretty versatile. It's a good support element. And overall, I think it's very solid. It ironically runs into the opposite problem that Geo has, where Geo's reaction doesn't do anything, and therefore it's kind of pointless. Whereas I feel like with Anemo, because it reacts with everything, basically every character ends up becoming an elemental mastery build in some way, shape, or form. And it's just, okay, stack elemental mastery to 1,000, random bullshit Go. But it's a good element, I think. I think it's in a solid place in comparison to some of the others that we've gone over this past. I was gonna say week, but over this past season.
All right. Well, we do have a character review to get to, and we have a couple of events going on, and then some news outside of the Hoyoverse realm. So we want to get to that. So we'll jump to events first, and Steve, I'll throw it to you to kind of break down what we have going on in Star Rail and Genshin Impact.
All right, so as far as events go, let's start with Honkai Star Rail. This will be pretty straightforward. Gift of Odyssey is started up again because we're at the beginning of a patch. So get your free 10 pools by logging in for 7 days. There's also a new Divergent Universe season that has started. So if you're like me, it's time to start grinding up to max level on that and getting all those rewards there. There's quite a few. But that's about it for Honkai Star Rail outside of the Trailblazer main story. But for Genshin Impact, the event that we have going on at the moment is Realm of Tempered Valor. It's a tower climbing event. There are 25 floors per stage, I guess, and you have to beat each floor within 30 seconds. And that's basically the event. It's a combat event. See how high you can climb and get rewards for beating the stages quickly and getting as high as you can. But those are the events in the Hoyoverse.
All right. Well, now we'll talk about some new characters, or new character, I guess I should say, and that would be Tribby, along with this new patch in Star Rail and new event and login bonuses and such. Tribby is a new 5-star character in the quantum element and is in the path of harmony. And so as we do when new characters come out, we're just going to give you kind of a base breakdown as far as how to build them, and then some maybe sample teams to put them on that have been kind of theory crafted, or maybe some people had some access to the beta and tested out. We don't break down specifics in the kit necessarily, but just to go over Tribby and kind of what she'll fit into in terms of team compositions and what she does. As far as best light cones for her, what a shocker. Signature light cone is going to be the best option for her. It is actually kind of a big power spike, I think, in terms of her output with the signature light cone, but if you don't have the currency, or you're saving for the plethora of characters that are coming up, because you like the characters that are coming up, or because you've been paying attention to some news that has been coming about some certain gimmicks, which I don't know if we want to talk about or not, or rant about. This will be one of my rants, actually. Okay. All right. No rant from me today about it, but maybe in the future. But if you aren't pulling for her light cone, a free to play option going to be Dance Dance Dance. It's going to be the light cone for Tribby. For the relic set, you are going to want to look at utilizing the Poet of Morning Collapse, which is going to be the 2-piece increasing the quantum damage by 10%, and then 4-piece decreases the wearer's speed by 8%, and then applies buffs if the user speed is less than certain thresholds at 110 and 95. It would increase their crit rate by either 20% or 32% if you're under the 95% crit rate. And then that effect also applies to the wearer's memo sprite. So those are going to be the best relic sets there. Planar sets, think for planar sets, you're kind of looking at the, let me take a look here. Sprightly Von Walk. No, that's a lie. I'm sorry. That's different. Something else. You're going to be looking at Bone Collection, Serene Demesne. Sorry. Got my notes here a little out of order, but that's going to be the best planetary set for her. So it's going to be one of the kind of the newer sets that's going to be focused for her. If you are in the process of farming that, or you're not interested in farming it, the other option would be the Inert Salsado, which is going to be like an okay option for her, but that Bone Collection Serene Demesne is going to be the main choice for her. For substats and main stats on the body, you're going to be looking at crit rate, crit damage. Per feet, you're actually going to be looking at the HP percentage because you don't want more speed because of the artifact set. You want to be under that threshold to get the crit rate bonus applied to both her and any memo sprites there. For the planar sphere, HP percentage or quantum damage, and then for link rope, energy regen rate or HP percentage, kind of prioritizing that first one and then the second one. Substats, speed would be, to get to the desired breakpoint, I guess, if you're wanting to do it that way. Crit rate, and then crit damage HP percentage, so kind of an HP scaler. As far as some sample teams for her, she's going to be kind of the Herta, not little Herta, but the Herta. She's going to be a big supporter for the Herta. And so if you have an account with a lot of units, kind of the premium team is Tribby, the Herta, Jade, and Lingsha. And maybe you don't have all of those 5-star characters and you're on maybe a little bit more of a budget team. You can look at her, the Herta, Gallagher, and Serval would be maybe an example team. If you don't have the Herta, maybe you have Aglaya, and you pulled for Aglaya. Sunday, you have Tribby, and then Ho-Oh. Again, those are kind of the premium teams. You have an Acheron premium team. You have a Jingyuan premium team. You have a lot of different teams that you can look at and then plug in and play if maybe you need to look at more of a budget option because you don't have all the 5 stars. And again, all these have just kind of been theory crafted. So I'll run through these last 3 teams with Acheron. Acheron being with Tribby, Adventuring, and then Zhao Q. If you pulled for him, you have Jingyuan, Sunday, Tribby, and Ho-Oh. And then the last kind of team to look at here would be Yunli, Sunday, Tribby, and Ho-Oh. So those are going to be some sample teams. We'll see what her usage rate looks like in not only this current MOC going on, which would probably feature her a bit, but also, what's her staying power over time, similar to how we've seen some units staying time in Spiral Abyss and Genshin, or their lack thereof. We'll be interested to see how Tribby stays around here. But that's going to be Tribby in a nutshell. It's skipping for me, but that's more because of my resources available to me, plus what I know is coming down the road. But I definitely think she's a strong candidate for being a support. What about you, Steve? Are you going to be pulling for Tribby, or are you passing?
I'm probably passing. I do believe that she'll be a solid support, but based on what I believe is coming down the pipe, further on, I think I want to hoard and to I'm not. I don't think that as a support she is irreplaceable in the same way that certain other supports are. Let me put it that way. I could be wrong. I might need to grab her on a rerun, but with the way Honkai Star Rail is kind of power creeping at the moment, who knows, by the time that she's up for a rerun, maybe there'll be a better support out there already. So
Is this where we rant now? No, not ranting yet. Okay,
no, no rant, no rant,
Okay, no rant.
just
Okay,
just
no, you
commenting.
mentioned the power creep. I thought we were gonna. Okay, no.
Well, no,
All right.
not about what we both are thinking of, but yeah, that's
All right. So that's gonna do it for the Star Rail and the Hoyoverse universe. So I want to shift to some other news outside of Hoyoverse because we do have a few things going on. We have Pokemon Masters EX. This one was I had forgotten about this game. But Pokemon Masters EX is celebrating or getting ready to celebrate their 5.5-year anniversary. I was surprised that this game had been around that long. I didn't realize it had been around for this 5.5 anniversary. I thought it had come out a few years ago, but to say that they're already at their 5.5 anniversary, that was surprising. Other things that were released or announced: Snowbreak, Containment Zone. They just dropped this past week the 2.6 trailer for that version called Blossoms in Ruins. So if you are interested in Snowbreak, be sure to go check out the trailer to see what new characters they will be instilling, as well as other new interactive scenes and things of that nature. I am giving my 07 to Snowbreak as I have officially uninstalled it from my rotation as I needed to make space, and those 26 gigs that it takes up through Steam for how much I was playing it. Yes, 07's in the chat for that one. Other things, Tribe 9, I mentioned this last week, having their official launch, and they do have a PC client available through Steam if you're interested in that. But the reason I bring them up again is because we are a week or little less than a week into their launch, and they have already decided to increase the rates for the equivalent of SSR units. So originally they followed kind of a Genshin path of 0.6% chance. They have since increased that to it's now a 2% chance. So you're talking an increase of 1.4% in terms of the flat number, but going from 0.6 to 2% is over 3 times more likely to get an SSR unit in a poll now. The other change that they announced that they're doing is, instead of being a 50-50 when you do hit the SSR unit, it is now a 75-25 to get the banner unit. So I did want to mention that. So if you were originally intrigued by the game, because its combat is similar to Zenless Zone Zero, it's made by the same folks that did Danganronpa, so there's similar animation styles involved. But if you were interested by it, but the pull rate was turning you off to the game, just note that they have increased that and changed it from a 50-50 coin flip to a 75-25 for the limited characters on those limited banners. Other news, we have 2 end of service announcements. So SNK All-Star Brawl has ended service this past week. It's officially done. And end of service announcement for My Hero Academia, The Strongest Hero, that will be ending service next month. I believe it was March 31st to be specific. So My Hero Academia, The Strongest Hero is shutting down next month. But in games that are still in my rotation and still playing, Girls Frontline 2 Exilium, they just had a new patch come out, so a new event, new mini game. It's kind of got a cafe theme because the new character, Santaresi, definitely mispronouncing that, but anyway, she is a maid type character, cafe maid character, so fits the theme of the event. She is a support class unit who uses an assault rifle, and she basically does physical damage, but she does have elements of burn damage, so there's some synergy there. And just as a reminder, with Girls Frontline 2, the Chinese server is about a year ahead of the global server. So as far as right now on global, in terms of what she synergizes with, she may not be a mainstay or a must pull for you now, but there are some synergies with some characters out in the Chinese server that increases her utility and her synergies and makes her a bit more relevant in the meta. So just something to consider if you are road mapping for the future. If you don't care about this and your waifu's over meta only and you love maids, she's adorable in that regard. She makes an awesome looking cup of coffee as part of one of her interact clickable things. But yeah, Girls Frontline 2 Exilium, new event, new character, and then they're doing a rerun of the Ulrid banner. She was the sword user that global users got on launch as an option to pull for. So if you didn't get her on launch because you were pulling for Suomi, Ulrid is being rerun as well. So be sure to check that out. That's running for the next couple of weeks. But that's going to do it for us here on today's episode. We want to thank you guys for joining us this week. Let us know your thoughts down below on the state of the Geo and Anemo elements in Genshin. If you did enjoy the episode, you'd like to show your support for the show, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe to the show and the channel down below. You can always email us at brohoyopod@gmail.com with questions or suggestions for the show. We also have the link to our Discord in the description, so you can come join us over there for more news, game nights, content notifications, and discussion. You can join us next week. We continue our mini-series on the elemental review of teams in Genshin. Next week, we're going to be diving into the usage rates and where they are now, key units and builds for the most recent element, Dendro, added to Genshin. But until then, keep gaming.
Choice, go fight against your fate.